What's going on, guys? I'm the FPL Chairman and welcome to my Game Week 2 deep dive and preview. In this video, I'll be taking you through some statistical approaches to Game Week 2 and trying to give you the best insight possible so you can make the right decisions going into Game Week 2, but also bearing in mind the upcoming game weeks as well. The first thing we're going to feature is the best fixtures for Game Week 2. What I've pulled up here is a screenshot that I've taken from Fantasy Football Hub, which is highlighting those teams with the strongest fixtures going into Game Week 2. I'm not going to go through all the teams here, as that would be too much time to go into it in too depth. But I'm going to go into a couple, and as you can see at the bottom, I've just got a couple key call-outs and a couple of questions that I would be thinking as myself going into Game Week 2. Starting off with Nottingham Forest. There isn't too many players really here to talk about. There's been a lot of discussions in terms of Turner as a goalkeeper. If you do have two operating and two playing goalkeeper options, for me, putting in Turner this week is a great shout against Sheffield United. Although they did have chances against Palace, I think they are going to be a pretty nailed-on team for a potential clean sheet this Game Week 2. So if I was you, if you have Turner, if you possibly have two operating goalkeepers, I'd definitely put one in. Liverpool is the next team. Obviously, they've got Bournemouth at home. I liked what I saw with the Liverpool attacking options. The obvious thing is if you do have a Salah draft and Salah is your team, and you do have Haaland, I personally would be captaining Salah. It's one of the key questions that I've got below. I think the attacking threat that Liverpool do have, Bournemouth at home, I swear Bournemouth at home in previous seasons has always been a very strong fixture for Liverpool. So if you do have Salah in your team, my personal opinion is to put him in over Haaland. Man City obviously have Newcastle at home, which is going to be a difficult fixture, I think. I think Newcastle looked great against Villa, although I did think Villa capitulated slightly when Mings got injured. They looked all over the place in the final minutes. I would go for Salah over Haaland. I personally have Haaland in my team, and we'll come on to that in at the end of the video. But if you have Salah in your team, I would be nominating for a captain. The third team from the top, and that I'll be discussing, is Aston Villa. Obviously, we've seen it. Isak for Newcastle's price has gone up this game week in response to him obviously getting his 2 goals against Aston Villa. However, when we look at Newcastle's fixtures, and you can see actually on here, scrolling down the bottom, they aren't really anywhere near in terms of easy games for Game Week 2. And as we'll come on into looking at Game Week 2 to Game Week 5, they've not got an easy run of fixtures. So if you have Watkins in your team, I would be holding Watkins. We'll come on to the other game week fixtures, but Everton at home, I think that's a game that Aston Villa can really bounce back from after a very, very bad showing against Newcastle. This is the perfect game to really get that confidence back under Unai's team, and I really think this is the game week for Watkins. And as someone who has Watkins and got a lucky assist, I'll be really looking forward to this game week 2 and seeing how Villa do. Looking ahead to Game Week 2 to Game Week 5, what I wanted to do here is not just consider the first game week and make knee-jerky reactions to that as well. When you are making these transfers to Game Week 2, I want you to bear in mind what the upcoming game weeks look like. The reason why I've looked Game Week 2 to Game Week 5 is typically, speaking from my experience last season, Game Week 5 I think gives FPL managers more than enough information to be able to pull the trigger for a wild card. I personally won't be doing a wild card this game week or probably the next game week, as I think there's not enough information in terms of every team's players, who's playing, who's potentially getting minutes, who's potentially a rotational option. So for me, looking at the next 4 game weeks is a much better approach to really refining what your draft is going to look like as well. So starting off at the top, same as what we just did through as well, I've got a couple of questions at the bottom that I'd be asking. We're going to go through some of the teams. Chelsea obviously are ranking at the top with 6.2 in terms of fixture difficulty. Obviously having the strongest fixtures with West Ham away, Luton at home, Forest at home, and then Bournemouth. They're incredibly strong fixture for Chelsea. I really liked what I saw with Chelsea against Liverpool. They were really, really attacking. Had plenty of attacking threats as well. Be that Jackson, be that Chilwell on the left, Reece James on the right. Their team's stacked with talent. And if you look at the transfer strategy that they're actually bringing in, you've got the likes of Lavia coming in, Caicedo's just come in, Elise rumoured to be coming in as well from Palace. I think going to 2 Chelsea options is a must. Again, we'll come on to my transfer strategy, but having 2 Chelsea assets in there, potentially even 3 going into these next game weeks, I think is going to net FPL managers great points. Personally, for me, I would be looking at Nicholas Jackson whilst Nkunku's injured. I'd be looking at Sanchez with 4.5 million. That's a very, very cheap option for a starting Chelsea goalkeeper where they are going into really easy fixtures. If you've got the money for Chilwell, potentially, I would be looking to put him in. I personally already have Reece James in my team. I've just got everything crossed that he doesn't get injured and he can deliver in points. But I think this next game for West Ham is going to be very telling. But stack up on Chelsea, and I think Chelsea defence is the best way to go. Looking down in terms of Spurs, they have then the second easiest fixtures with Man United at home, Bournemouth, Burnley and Sheffield United. Getting over that hurdle from Manchester United in game week 2 is going to be essential, but I spoke about it in previous videos. I think Spurs have got some fantastic attacking talent. Obviously with Kane going, that is slightly hindered, but the likes of Maddison was a real focal point, real playmaker. He is definitely my one to watch, must buy going ahead. I think he's a great option for the price he's at. And he seems to be the real playmaker for Spurs. I'll be interested to see how Richarlison performs. He was unlucky not to get on the header that I think it was Romeo that got. But Spurs assets are definitely something that I will be keeping my eye on, but not just yet pulling the trigger on many players. Maddison is definitely the one to watch. Moving on to Liverpool, I touched it in the just previously when talking about their game at Bournemouth. They've got some good fixtures. I do think the 5.4 rating from Fantasy Football Hub is a bit misleading because you've got Bournemouth at home. Yes, that's a stacked game. However, Newcastle away, Aston Villa at home and Wolves away. From what I've seen in game week 1, these teams do have a lot of potential, Wolves being the much surprising package against that United team who were pretty miserable. But I am interested in how the likes of Jota get on, Diaz as well. The main thing for me with the Liverpool assets is how many minutes they're going to get. I do think their attacking options have a lot of depth. You got Gakpo, Nunez, Salah, Diaz, Jota, a lot of players, Harvey Elliott even as well. And there's a lot of potential rotation there. So my thing to think about and my concern with Liverpool players is, although they may look very good as options, the minutes is going to be the key thing here. Last one I just want to pull out is at the bottom is Brighton with 5.2. Obviously, there's not much really separating the teams in the midfield in terms of game week difficulty, looking ahead to 2 to 5. However, Brighton have Wolves away, West Ham at home, Newcastle at home and Man United. The next 2 game weeks still look like great potential options. However, it is going to get increasingly difficult when you look at game week 4 and game week 5. So one to monitor with your Brighton assets. I think stacking up to 3 Brighton assets is potentially too risky. I think the Espitan and João Pedro Toma maybe going up to 2 max Brighton is a good way to go. It's a good enabler because of their cost and how much they cost ultimately. I think there's going to be a lot of information that's needed to be gathered in game week 2, but my recommendations are look to Chelsea assets. Moving ahead on to the Chairman's Game Week 2. So this is a feature that I want to bring into these videos when we're looking ahead into the next game week in terms of how's my team looking, how's it stacking up. Obviously, again, I'm using Fantasy Football Hub here to just demonstrate what the potential is in terms of the points for my players at the moment, what the team rating is through AI, what's the game week ranking rating looking like as well. And just I've got some key questions that I'm considering going into game week 2 as well. Obviously, the main one is what to do with Gabriel at Arsenal. Obviously, from being what I called a nailed-on starter from starting 38 games last season to not featuring until the 87th minute is a real cause for concern. There are rumours that he's linked with a Saudi Arabia move as well. So I'm going to monitor it over the next 2 days. So recording this on the Wednesday. I do really want to roll a transfer, and I'll come on to that. But at the moment, I'm going to hold him. I do have Baldock on my bench for Sheffield United, although I think that is that's a 2-point max player ultimately. But yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. If he does start on the bench again, then in game week 2, looking into game week 3, I'll definitely having to be looking to get him out of my team. The United players, I've stacked up quite a decent amount of my budget on United players. Rashford at 9 million, Fernandes at 8.5 million. They got Spurs away, Nottingham Forest at home and Arsenal away. Apart from the Forest game, they're tough fixtures. Game week 2 is going to be really telling in terms of how United are able to bounce back after that really poor showing to Wolves at home. So at the moment, I'm staying with the 2. Rashford, I still think, has great attacking potential, and he was really advancing that final third for United. Did get a couple of shots away, so I think there is talent there. Bruno seemed more deep similar to Odegaard really, in quite a deep role, and didn't really advance too much. So if I am looking ahead into what potentially to do into game week 3, Fernandes for me is at risk. But that Forest fixture in game week 3 is really appealing. So it might be a question of holding after the Forest game, capturing those points, and then ahead of the Arsenal game, looking to switch them out potentially, or if I'm considering a wild card. Like I mentioned, transfer strategy, I do have $500,000 in the bank, which is something that I made sure that I did have, so I can capture any price changes. For me, I'm going to, like I said, monitor the news on Gabriel, but the plan is to roll that transfer going into game week 3 so I can make 2 free options. And then if I feel the need that there is a player that's really stand out, or for example, I want to stack up on an additional Chelsea player, then I will potentially invest that -4 points into that as well. Final point is my captain for game week 2. I touched on it at the start. Without Salah in my team, the 2 main picks for me are Saka away at Palace and Haaland at home to Newcastle. I learned my lesson with game week 1 where I captained Rashford. He didn't return anything and I stupidly didn't choose Haaland. The thought process there was I was thinking, I think Burnley defenders are going to stack up on Haaland, but with 6 touches in the first half and 2 goals, I've learned not to question his abilities. So I will be captaining Haaland into game week 2, as opposed to Saka. But if you are someone who has Salah in your team, I would definitely be putting him as the captain, as I think he's going to be a big haul against Bournemouth. But that's it, guys. Let me know in the comments if this is a video that you've enjoyed, if you found this actually insightful with planning your transfers going into game week 2 and actually further than game week 2. I'd be really interested to know, what are you planning on doing? Who do you have right now? Do you have Salah? Are you choosing to captain him as opposed to Haaland? Be great to know, be great to speak to you guys in the comments. And once again, thank you all for the responses over the last few videos. Obviously very new to FPL content creation, but really enjoying it, looking to connect with other content creators as well. So guys, if you really did enjoy the video, please give it a like, subscribe for more, as I'm looking to put out content as regularly as I possibly can. But all the best into game week 2, and I will speak to you guys soon.